one of the favorite topics when you're in business is to be able to plan ahead, to have a predictable environment, and part of that is rule of law. And our next speaker has had a few very good things to say about rule of law. Ambassador Carlos Moreno arrived on June 21st, 2014. It's less than a year in Belize. And I think he's been fairly busy ever since. It's about 2 years worth of traveling around you've done, right, Ambassador? Anyway, Ambassador, prior to his arrival in Belize, Ambassador Moreno served as an Associate Justice on the California Supreme Court. Prior to that, he served as a United States District Judge in the Central District of California, nominated to the bench by President Clinton. He also served as a Superior Court Judge for Los Angeles County and as a Municipal Court Judge for the Compton Judicial District. Ambassador, I'm not giving dates because I figure people start to calculate things, and I notice what's classified and what's unclassified. So, prior to his appointment to the bench, he was a lawyer in private practice. He began his legal career serving as a deputy city attorney in Los Angeles, where he focused on prosecuting criminal and civil consumer protection cases and handling politically sensitive and legislative matters as a special counsel to the city attorney. Ambassador Moreno has served as president of the Mexican-American Bar Association and as a board member of numerous civic organizations. Ambassador Moreno received the 1997 Criminal Justice Superior Court Judge of the Year Award from the Los Angeles County Bar Association and the 2003 Roger J. Traynor Appellate Justice of the Year Award from the Consumer Attorneys Association of Los Angeles. He chaired the California Blue Ribbon Commission on Children in Foster Care, as well as the California Judicial Council statewide Bench Bar Media Committee. Born in Los Angeles on November 4th, should I say that year? Okay. His birthday is November 4th, though. Ambassador Moreno is married to Christine Moreno and has 3 children. He has a JD degree from Stanford Law School and a BA degree in political science from Yale. He's maintained ties to both universities, sitting on the Board of Governors of the Yale Alumni Association, and in 2009 was awarded the Yale Medal for his service to the university. He's also served on the Stanford Law School Board of Visitors. It seems to me from this bio that the ambassador is particularly qualified to speak on rule of law, and Ambassador, look forward to hearing.
Thank you, Kay, for that overly generous introduction. Not only did you deliver it with such aplomb, but you delivered it in the exact manner in which I wrote it. So,
I plagiarized completely.
Okay, all right. I'm so delighted to be here. And I'm also here with, as Kay mentioned, with Judge Richard Paez, who's visiting me for the week, so I thought I would bring him to a real Belizean event, a Chamber of Commerce meeting, but I've also brought my political economic advisors from my section, Nathan Bland and his assistant Carmen. And yes, I am currently celebrating my 40th year. Hard to believe, as a lawyer. Yes, I'm that old, Kay. But I consider it a distinct honor to have served as a public prosecutor, a business lawyer, a judge on the trial courts, a judge on the appellate court, both at the state and the federal level. So I think that maybe does qualify me a little bit to speak about what one of my passions is, and that's, did I step on something?
Yeah, we'll plug that.
Okay, I think it's working, yeah. About my wife, to whom I always listen, suggests that I should always include a joke in any talk that I give. And believe me, in my many years of law practice, I've heard many, many lawyer jokes, like, why won't sharks attack a lawyer? A professional courtesy. But one other comment about lawyers that's often misinterpreted is made by Shakespeare in his play Henry VI. And you may have heard this quote: the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Now, I mention that because Many people mistakenly interpret this quote to be anti-lawyer. Well, it would appear to be that. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. And many people think that that is anti, did I do that again? Yeah. Is anti-lawyer. But in fact, it's not a criticism at all about lawyers. It's really probably the greatest compliment one can give to lawyers as the guarantors of liberty and justice in society. In the context of the play, the Shakespearean play where that quote comes from, the statement is made by a rebel who wishes to create chaos and disturb law and order so that he himself can become the king. He wishes to destroy the law, not to preserve the law, so that the citizens would have no protection of law and order should he succeed if he kills all the lawyers. So my simple theme tonight is pretty straightforward. It's my utterly unassailable belief that a stable, consistent, and independent rule of law is the foundation of freedom and democracy in any society, and that a fidelity to the law to the rule of law has broad implications not only for citizen security, where it normally comes up, but for a healthy economy and economic development, things that you're very concerned about, and a healthy environment, among other things. Now, a few years back, Justice Anthony Kennedy spoke at my son's graduation from Stanford. You know, the apple does not fall far from the apple tree because my son is now clerking for a federal judge in Los Angeles. And at that graduation, I listened attentively to Justice Kennedy, not only because he's the so-called swing vote on many of the issues, progressive issues facing the United States Supreme Court, but because of what he said about rule of law in our society. He said that the rule of law is an instrument of progress. The rule of law is an instrument of progress. Now, what did he mean by that? Because I've reflected on that many times since then. And although he was speaking about law and freedom and democracy as all being interconnected, as they really are, I wanted to refine his thoughts in my own mind, especially his observations about law as an instrument of progress. Or as the British would say, progress. To me, rule of law is much more than just political stability, because we know that there are many regimes where rule of law is so prevalent and so strict that it leads to political repression and oppression, and it becomes a rule of law in a perverse way, the absence of law and the progenitor of lawlessness. In fact, we know that the constitutions of many countries, if you read them closely, look like a model Bill of Rights, when in reality they are quite the opposite. And rule of law is much more than just sending bad people to prison, something I did for a good part of my career as a judge. So how do we measure Justice Kennedy's sense of law as an instrument of progress? And how does law advance or enhance progress in our society? Is progress, the way Justice Kennedy talks about, a stronger and more equitable economy? Is it a better healthcare system, educational system, a better criminal justice system? Or is it a system that protects our environment and natural resources? It should come as no surprise that it really is all of these, progress and rule of law. In my view, law as an instrument of progress has many facets. And let me just focus on healthy economies that depend on rule of law. A rule of law that's trustworthy, efficient, and impartial. One in which contracts are entered into fairly and openly. That would be nice. Where businesses compete on an even playing field. Where remedies for breach of contract are realistic and attainable. Where judgments are enforced, actually enforced by the courts and in a timely fashion, where you don't have to wait year upon year for a resolution. And where barriers to investment are reasonable and returns on your investment are safe, even if they're not guaranteed. They're never guaranteed. Investors, foreign and domestic, are naturally reluctant to invest their resources in economies lacking a rule of law that inspires investor confidence and trust in all of their business dealings and trade. And this is precisely where organizations like yours, BCCI, have such an important role to play. I've noticed how the BCCI is not hesitant to take an objective stance, nonpartisan stance, and make public calls for greater transparency and accountability within Belize. And I know here that I'm preaching to the choir because I've seen some of your press releases, including one just last fall, where you as an organization called upon your government to do something about the rising levels of crime and lawlessness because of how it would impact your business climate. So I applaud all of you at BCCI collectively for being willing to stand up in a non-political manner for a stronger, better business and investment climate here in Belize. Now, my experience as a business lawyer and a judge in California convinced me that doing business without a stable rule of law would be to engage in a fool's errand. And it's for obvious reasons that businesses depend upon things like I've mentioned, written contracts, where intellectual property, as an example, whether it's a patent, a trademark, or a copyright, are protected, and where rights and remedies, including injunctive relief, if you have to get an order to force someone to stop doing what they're doing, are accessible and meaningful by access to the courts. One other factor, and I speak of this as a judge, a credible rule of law must also ensure that the courts are independent, that their work is transparent, that they're properly financed, and whose judgments are grounded in law, and where judicial appointments are based on merits. Protection of the environment, this is the only other example I will give you of vital interest for Belize, is another example of an area that's heavily dependent on the rule of law. Environmental regulations sometimes are cast aside when you have a triage method of dealing with the law. It's not the highest priority, but these regulations are very meaningful. They're plentiful, they're well-meaning, but from experience, I know that enforcement is complex and often daunting, and I know that's the case here in Belize. Therefore, environmental laws and regulations, as a result, often go unenforced, and that's, in a sense, if you think about it, another form of lawlessness, where the laws exist on the books, but let's face it, they go unenforced. Yet our patrimony, our legacy for the future, the very purity of our water, our air, our livelihood, from the bounties of the sea, as we have here in Belize, and the preservation of the beautiful forests, without any question, these resources depend again on a rule of law that is honest, fair, and consistent. And it's all the more important here in the country that we call the jewel that is Belize, with its incredible natural resources, the pristine reefs, the protected forests, the ancient Mayan ruins, all deserving of protection. And that reminds me of one other thing that Justice Kennedy said in his Stanford speech, and he said that in the absence of law, what do we have? We have lawlessness. Now, I want to just mention or refer to a brief summation of this important principle about lawlessness. One of my favorite movies and a play, you may be familiar with it, is called A Man for All Seasons. And in that play, the main character, Sir Thomas More, refers to the trees in the forests of England as representing the many laws that protect us. It's an apt metaphor, I think. Trees that serve as laws protecting us from the heavy winds and gales. Laws that protect all of us, including all evildoers, that in the play, a reference is made to the laws that would protect even the devil himself, says More. Now that's something to think about. We normally think of the laws as protecting only the innocent, but in fact they protect the guilty, they protect the devil. More, in the play, is the Solicitor General for King Henry VIII. And he's been asked by the king to permit him to divorce his wife. And I think King Henry VIII had, 6 wives? I think one of them, Anne Boleyn, he beheaded. But in this instance, he wanted to divorce his wife, and that was against the law. and Moore refused the request to disobey the law, to do away with it. And Moore is urged by a colleague to ignore the law, and if you know the play, Moore is ultimately executed for his stand on the law as a matter of principle. Now, as Moore is about to face his executioners, the colleague suggests, that he would cut down all the laws, he would cut down all the trees, if it meant going after someone evil, like the devil. And in response, Moore says, ask the colleague, but what would you do? What would you do after you cut down all the trees? Where would you hide now that all the laws, the trees, concludes by saying that this country is planted thick with laws from coast to coast, and if you cut them down, do you think you would stand upright in the winds that would blow them? Yes, I would give the devil the benefit of law for my own safety's sake. So yes, you see, we know that rule of law is essential to the protection of all of us. Yes, preserving citizen security and fighting crime and protecting the innocent, as well as the guilty. But rule of law means much more than that, much more. Whether it's protecting your business interests or protecting the environment, I'm sure that each of you in your own way can divine how rule of law impacts your practice, your livelihood, the lives of your clients, and the quality of your life and that of your neighbors. And you can just fill in the blank how rule of law fits into your particular situation. Now, I just want to make one final point, an important point, and that is how rule of law can and should ensure citizen equality. We are all equal. Now, it would be extremely naive of me to insist that we are all born equally, with an equal opportunity from when we're born to achieve a safe, healthy, and prosperous life. I don't believe it. Unfortunately, that simply is not the case, not here and not in the United States. But a truly effective rule of law allows the ordinary man or woman on the street, could be a tenant, could be an employee or a private entity, a consumer, to take on the biggest corporation, could take on a private or governmental entity, to challenge an unfair business practice or an unconstitutional policy or procedure or the taking of property by the government or the like. The law can be a great equalizer in those circumstances when the justice system does fulfill its intended function of delivering equal justice for all. And that's a phrase, a mantra that's enshrined on the facade of the United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. So I always take my hat off to the many lawyers and judges who have the courage and strength to uphold the rule of law. In my mind, they truly serve as the stewards and the protectors, the guardians and the guarantors of our civil rights and our civil liberties. The dignity and integrity of our justice system depends on their devoted service and unwavering commitment, and it demands nothing less from all of us. And I repeat, I take my hat off to you as well, BCCI, as you advocate for better economic growth and vitality through rule of law. You too play an important role in ensuring that the rule of law is adhered to in our society, whether it's in business or in other venues. So I'm honored that you invited me here to celebrate your 95th annual general meeting. I personally and my staff look forward to continuing our work with you in the future. And again, congratulations on 95 years of service to the business community here in Belize. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Moreno.